Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're heading off into the world of Australian exploration. We're going to be tracking the path of someone you might not know about, but get this. This guy's journeys left a mark all over Australia. George William Evans.
An explorer whose story, much like this mysterious river we're going to talk about, flows right through the heart of Australia's past.
Okay, a mysterious river, huh? Now I'm really interested. But before we get lost in the current, let's back up a bit. We've all heard of the Blue Mountains, right? Those famous peaks west of Sydney. Picture this. It's the early 1800s, and those mountains, they were like a giant wall. Nobody could get through them, keeping all the secrets of inland Australia hidden away.
Yeah, it's easy to forget now when we have things like satellite images and Google Maps, just how intimidating those mountains must have been back then. They were a real barrier, both physically and mentally, a real reminder of the massive unexplored wilderness that lay beyond the edges of where the Europeans had settled.
And that's where George William Evans comes in. While everyone else was stumped by the Blue Mountains, Evans, he saw a challenge. In 1813, he achieved what everyone thought was impossible. He found a way through. No GPS, no detailed maps or anything like that, just incredible determination and some seriously good surveying skills.
And those skills, they were crucial. And not just for finding their way through that difficult terrain, being able to map things accurately, that was super important for the British Empire expanding its colonies. You see, Evans wasn't just in it for the adventure. He was actually laying the groundwork for controlling resources and for Europeans to settle in the area. Those maps he was making weren't just lines on paper. They were basically blueprints for shaping how Australia would look in the future.
It really makes you think, we can still see the impact of his work today. The routes he mapped out, the landmarks he marked down, they literally shaped the landscape, and we can still see how it influences where people live even now. It's like this ripple effect that's still going all these years later. But you know what I find so interesting? Evans wasn't content with just conquering one impossible thing. He was really drawn to the unknown, and rumors started swirling about a river that flowed westward. These rumors, they were about to set him on another incredible journey. All right, this mysterious river, you've got me hooked. It's like something straight out of legend. What was so special about a river flowing westward? Did people think they were going to find, like, Niagara Falls in reverse or something?
Well, maybe not Niagara Falls exactly, but you've hit the nail on the head with the whole sense of wonder and excitement around this river. You see, back in the early 1800s, European maps of Australia were pretty much blank canvases, huge empty spaces just begging to be filled in. And of course, this led to all sorts of wild speculation. The idea of a big river flowing westward, maybe even an inland sea, really captured people's imaginations.
Like finding a hidden treasure map or something. I bet the taverns were buzzing with stories about it. Tales of massive waterways, untold riches, maybe even a secret passage to the north coast.
You got it. And for a guy like Evans, who seemed to love a good challenge, the pull of this mystery must have been impossible to resist. Just 2 years after he conquered those Blue Mountains, in 1815, he set out from Bathurst with a small group on a mission. Got to find that mysterious river.
Wait a minute, we're talking about heading deep into the outback here, right? I mean, even today with all our fancy gear and technology, that landscape can be brutal. What kind of crazy challenges were they facing back then?
Imagine this. The sun is beating down on you, scorching hot. Supplies are running low with every passing day, and you're traveling through land no European had ever seen before. Evans kept detailed journals, and they paint a vivid picture of what it was like. Thick, unforgiving bushland, treacherous gorges, and the constant fear of running out of water or food. It was a true test of human endurance, that's for sure.
Sounds like something straight out of an adventure novel. What kept these guys going when things got so tough? Was it pure willpower, or was there something more to it?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? I think for Evans, it was this potent combination of determination, a thirst for discovery, and that very human desire to leave your mark on the world. He meticulously documented everything, driven by this belief that his work could unlock the secrets of this vast continent.
And you know what? He was right. On May 25th, 1815, Evans and his team stumbled upon it. A major river flowing westward, just like the rumors had said.
Can you imagine that moment? Weeks of hardship and uncertainty, and then boom, they find their river. So tell me, what was it like, this river that everyone was so obsessed with? Evans, always the surveyor, he documented it in great detail, noted down its width, its flow, the types of plants and trees growing nearby. He named it the Lachlan River, after Governor Lachlan Macquarie. But if you look past the technical details in his journals, you can almost feel the awe in his words, Like he realized he'd stumbled onto something truly remarkable.
And this wasn't just any river, right? This was like a physical representation of all the hopes and dreams that fueled so much exploration back then.
You're exactly right. The Lachlan River, even though it didn't lead to a mythical inland sea or anything like that, it was a crucial discovery for understanding what was going on in the interior of Australia. It opened up new doors for Europeans to settle, for trade routes, for figuring out how all the waterways in this vast continent were connected.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think that a river could have so much meaning attached to it. But you know what I find really powerful? That story about Evans carving his name into a eucalyptus tree on the banks of the Lachlan. It's such a human thing to do, don't you think? This need to leave a mark, a message that says, hey, I was here.
It really is a striking image. That tree, if it's still standing today, it's like a silent witness to history. It connects us directly to Evans, standing in that very spot over 200 years ago, and really makes you think, what kind of legacy are we leaving behind? How do we reconcile the ambition and achievements of explorers like Evans with the impact their discoveries had on the land and the people who are already living there?
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? That tree with Evan's name carved into it, it becomes more than just a cool story. It's like the symbol of all the complicated feelings we have when we look back at history.
Absolutely, and it highlights the contradictions we often see in historical figures, right? On one hand, you have this incredibly determined explorer charting unexplored territories, pushing the limits of what people knew back then. Evans wasn't just mapping out rivers and mountains, he was changing the way Europeans saw Australia. His meticulous work had a massive impact on how Europeans settled the land and how the nation developed.
And yet, like we've been talking about, we can't ignore the fact that his story is part of this much bigger, more complicated story of colonization. The story of indigenous populations being forced off their land and all the terrible things that happened as a result. It's a stark reminder that progress, at least how it was seen back then, often came at a huge human cost.
It's a difficult truth to face, and we can't shy away from it. We have to be able to acknowledge those complexities in history, the good and the bad, all mixed up together. Evans, like a lot of historical figures, he forces us to look at the past with a more nuanced perspective, to acknowledge both the great things that were accomplished and the terrible consequences, the big dreams and the injustices that happened along the way.
So, where does it leave us today? How do we make sense of these two sides of the past that seem to contradict each other? Do we just acknowledge how complicated it is and move on?
I don't think it's about erasing history or downplaying what Evans achieved. It's about understanding his story within the larger context of the time. Evan's story and the story of the Lachlan River, they can be a starting point for us to think more deeply about things. What does it mean to explore, to discover, to claim something as your own? These questions are still relevant today, especially when we're dealing with issues like cultural heritage, protecting our environment, and reconciling with the past.
It reminds us that history isn't just about memorizing dates and names from textbooks. It's a living, breathing thing that shapes who we are today and influences what our future will be. And just like we've seen with George William Evans, it's a story full of unexpected twists, surprising turns, and incredible discoveries.
That's for sure. And maybe, just like Evans carving his name into that tree, we have a responsibility to leave our own mark on the world. Not by taking ownership or conquering, but by learning from what came before us and working towards a future that's more just and more equitable for everyone.
Well said. And if this deep dive has made you curious about George William Evans, the thrill of exploration, or the complicated legacy of colonization, we encourage you to keep digging. We'll have links in the show notes to help you start your own journey of discovery. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep diving deep.